Today's lesson is about solving two-step equations. Your learning target says, I can discover and use a process to solve two-step equations. Yesterday we were working with algebra tiles and we found out that in a two-step equation we are going to deal with our constant first and then our coefficient. So in essence, just like we use inverse operations to solve one-step equations, we're going to use those again to solve two-step equations, and we're going to use PEMDAS backwards. We're going to start with adding and subtracting, and then our second step will be multiplying and dividing. So everything's sort of flipped on its head when we are solving our equations. So step one, I would deal with my constant. In other words, I am going to add 13 to both sides. So let's see how that looks. Whoops, I put that in the wrong spot. Let's try it over here. I'm going to add 13 to both sides. That gives me some inverses here, a negative 13 and a positive 13. Those cancel. And so I'm left with c divided by 2 on the left, and then 7 plus 13 is 20 on the right. Now I did that because I need my variable group alone. Now notice I'm always starting my work on the same side that my variable is at. All right, step two, I have to deal with my coefficient. And in this case, the opposite of dividing by 2 is multiplying by 2, both sides. So I will multiply this side. Let's use a dot instead. I'll multiply this side by 2, and I will multiply that side by 2. Now this time I don't get 0. A divided by 2 and a multiply by 2 will become 1. So I will have 1c on the left, and I will have 40 on the right. And so in step 2, when I dealt with my coefficient, because I need to isolate my variable. There's actually a third step, and that has to do with checking. So where this c used to be, I'm going to put a 40 that I believe my solution is going to be. 40 divided by 2 is 20. Minus 13 is indeed the 7 that it should be. So c equals 40 is my correct solution. All right, so let's talk through this one. I know this is a two-step problem, and we have 1, 2, 3 steps. Just don't think too hard about that. All right, we're going to talk through it, and then I'm going to have you work it. So in this one, remember we always start on the side with the variables, but this is kind of messy. I have 7y's minus 2y's. So instead of that mess, how about I just call that 5y's and 4 on the left of my equation and 29 on the right. So step 1, if you need to combine like terms. Because I need to start with a simplified equation. Okay, and then step 2. Step 2, you're going to deal with your constant. You're either adding or subtracting something. And step 3, you're going to deal with your coefficient. You're going to either multiply or divide. And in the end, you will have an isolated variable. So will you work through this problem, please, and come back when you're ready to check. right, so I did step 2. Up above, I subtracted 4 from both sides, and that left 5y on the left and 25 on the right. Then I'm going to deal with my coefficient by dividing both sides by 5. That will leave me with 1y on the left and 5 on the right. For us to make sure that that's right, though, I'm going to put a 5 in there, and I'm going to put a 5 in there just to make sure. So that makes this 35 minus 10 is 25. 25 plus 4 is 29. So I have the correct solution. You're going to try this one on your own with just a little bit of guidance from me. I would suggest that you get rid of your subtraction signs and combine your like terms before you do your 2 steps. Remember, step 1 is to deal with the constant by adding or subtracting. Step 2 is to deal with your coefficient by multiplying or dividing. Remember to always start on the side that has the variables. So pause me while you work this out and then come back for checking. All right, so I got rid of my subtraction sign, so I have a negative 4 and a negative z. I have 2 z's and a negative 1 z will leave me with a z and a negative 4 on one side and positive 4 on the other. I'm going to deal with my constant that's on the same side as the variable first. So that's this negative 4. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. And that leaves me with 1z on one side and 8 on the other. Generally, people don't write the 1, so I think z is going to be 8. So if I go back up here and I put an 8 right here, 2 times 8 is 16, plus a negative 4 is 12, plus a negative 8 is indeed 4. I have the right answer. All right, I'm going to have you try this one on your own as well. Step 1, remember you always start on the side that has the variable. I want you to deal with your constant by adding or subtracting. Step 2, I want you to deal with your coefficient by either multiplying or dividing. Check your answer to make sure you're right. When you are all done, come back and watch my solution. All right, so I would get rid of this plus 8 by subtracting 8 from both sides. A positive 8 and a negative 8 creates 0. That leaves c divided by 7 on the right side and negative 24 on the left. That was step 1. I dealt with my constant. Step 2, I'm going to deal with my coefficient. The opposite of dividing by 7 is multiplying by 7. I'll do that to both sides. A divided by 7 and a multiply by 7 create 1. So I'm left with 1c on the right and negative 168 on the left. That is the correct solution. All right, here's another one for you. My suggestion would be to combine your like terms and get rid of your subtraction sign if necessary before you do your 2 steps. Remember, you start with the side that has the variable and you deal with your constant first by adding or subtracting and your coefficient second by multiplying and dividing. When you have your answer and you've checked it, come back and see my solution. So you're going to notice that at the very top, I got rid of my subtraction sign. I added a negative 10. 21 plus a negative 10 is the 11. So I combined my like terms here and started solving. Subtracted 11 from both sides. That got me here. Divided both sides by 9. And there is my solution. Work this problem. Come back when you want to check my solution. Okay, so I started off here by subtracting 18 from both sides so that I could deal with my constant. Second step, I multiplied both sides by 3, but when I did that, I was left with a negative x. No one ever cares about negative x's. So in essence, all I did was change the sign of both numbers. Mathematically, what I did was I divided both sides by a -1, because remember there is a -1 here, and so I did my inverse operations. Final answer is x equals 75.